My landlord evicted me to sell my apartment to a developer. He didn't know the developer worked for me. In fact, he had no idea that I owned the entire company that was about to buy his building. And when I walked into that boardroom to reveal the truth, his face was priceless. This is the story of how I went from being a powerless tenant to becoming my landlord's worst nightmare. And trust me, by the end of this, you'll understand why karma sometimes wears a business suit. My name is Marcus, and until 6 months ago, I thought I was just another struggling tenant in New York City. I lived in apartment 4B at 147 Riverside Drive. Rent controlled, $800 a month. In Manhattan. Yes, you heard that right. $800. It was a tiny studio, maybe 400 square feet, but it had character. Original hardwood floors, exposed brick walls, windows facing the Hudson River. Most importantly, it was mine. Or at least, it felt like mine. I'd lived there for 3 years, ever since graduating college, working as a graphic designer, making just enough to survive in the city. The building was pre-war, built in 1924, full of history, full of stories, full of tenants who'd been there for decades. Mrs. Rodriguez in 2A had lived there since 1987. Mr. Kim in 3C raised 2 kids in his 1-bedroom. Sarah from 4A was a struggling actress who'd called it home for 5 years. We were a community, a family. We looked out for each other. But our landlord, Vincent Torino, saw us differently. He saw us as obstacles. Vincent was everything you'd expect from a slumlord. Cheap suits, gold chains, greasy hair slicked back. He drove a Mercedes but never fixed our broken heating. He wanted us gone, all of us, so he could renovate and charge market rate. Market rate for our apartments would be $4,000 a month, maybe $5,000. Our rent-controlled leases were costing him millions in potential income. So Vincent got creative. And by creative, I mean cruel. The harassment started small. Sudden inspections at inconvenient times. Maintenance requests that took months to complete. Noise complaints that resulted in threatening letters. Then it escalated. Our heat would mysteriously break in winter. The elevator would be under repair for weeks. Construction work would start at 6 a.m. on Saturdays. Vincent was trying to make our lives so miserable that we'd leave voluntarily. Some tenants cracked. Mrs. Peterson in 1B moved out after her 3rd flood from plumbing issues. The young couple in 3B left when their ceiling collapsed twice in 1 month. But the core group of us held strong. We knew our rights. We documented everything. We fought back through proper channels. Vincent hated us for it. "You people are bleeding me dry," he'd scream during tenant meetings. "This building is worth millions, and you're living here for peanuts." He wasn't wrong about the value. Our building sat on prime Manhattan real estate. The neighborhood was gentrifying fast. Luxury condos were popping up everywhere. But we had legal protections, rent control laws, tenant rights, long-term leases that couldn't be broken without cause. Vincent needed a different strategy. That strategy arrived in the form of Meridian Development Group. I first heard the name during a tense tenant meeting in March. "I've got some news," Vincent announced with a smug smile. "I'm selling this building." The room erupted. Tenants shouting questions, demanding explanations. "A major developer is buying the entire property," Vincent continued. "They're planning to tear it down and build luxury condominiums." My heart sank. This was it. This was how he'd finally get rid of us. "What about our leases?" Mrs. Rodriguez asked. "The new owners will honor existing agreements," Vincent lied smoothly. "But they'll need to make some adjustments for the renovation process." Adjustments. That was code for eviction. "How long do we have?" I asked. "The sale closes in 60 days. After that, you'll be dealing with Meridian Development Group." Meridian Development Group. I'd never heard of them, but I was about to become very familiar with their business practices. The eviction notice came on a Tuesday morning in April. I was getting ready for work when I heard the knock. Official. Loud. Persistent. I opened the door to find a process server. Young guy. Apologetic expression. Thick envelope in his hand. "Marcus Thompson." "That's me." "You're being served." I signed for the papers with shaking hands. I knew what they were before I opened them. Notice to quit. 30 days. Effective immediately. The reason listed was substantial renovation requiring vacant possession. Translation. They wanted me gone so they could gut the apartment. My hands were trembling as I read the legal language. Meridian Development Group was exercising their right to vacant possession for capital improvements exceeding 50% of the property value. It was all perfectly legal and completely devastating. I called in sick to work. I needed time to process this. Time to figure out my options. My first call was to legal aid, the tenant rights hotline. "I'm sorry," the lawyer told me. "If the new owner is planning major renovations, they can terminate rent-controlled leases with proper notice." "But this is my home," I protested. "I understand. but legally they're within their rights. My second call was to Mrs. Rodriguez. She'd received the same notice. So had Mr. Kim. So had Sarah. We were all being thrown out. That evening, we gathered in Mrs. Rodriguez's apartment. 6 remaining tenants. All facing eviction. All feeling powerless. We should fight this, Sarah said. Get a lawyer. File an injunction. With what money? Mr. Kim replied. Do you know how much lawyers cost? He was right. We were all struggling to pay rent, let alone legal fees. Maybe we should just take the relocation assistance, Mrs. Rodriguez suggested quietly. Meridian had offered each tenant $5,000 to leave voluntarily. It sounded generous until you tried to find a new apartment in Manhattan. $5,000 wouldn't even cover the security deposit on most places. I'm not giving up, I said. This is our home. They can't just throw us out because it's profitable. But even as I said it, I knew the truth. They could. And they were. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about my grandfather. Grandpa, Joe, had died 6 months earlier. Cancer. It was quick but brutal. He'd been my hero growing up. Self-made man. Started with nothing. Built a small business empire through hard work and smart investments. But he'd also been secretive about his business dealings. I knew he owned some commercial properties. Had investments in various companies. But he never talked details. When he passed, I inherited some of his assets. Not much, according to his lawyer. Minor holdings in a few companies, he'd said. Nothing significant. The paperwork was sitting in a box in my closet. I'd been too busy grieving to deal with the legal details. But that night, staring at my eviction notice, I decided it was time to understand what Grandpa had left me. I pulled out the file folder. Stock certificates. Property deeds. Corporate documents. Most of it was confusing legal language. But one name kept appearing, Meridian Development Group. My heart started racing. Meridian was the company buying my building. The company evicting me. And according to these documents, I own shares in Meridian Development Group. But how many shares? What percentage? Was it enough to matter? I needed professional help to understand these documents. The next morning, I called my grandfather's lawyer, Robert Sterling. Mr. Sterling, I need help understanding my inheritance documents. Of course, Marcus. What specific questions do you have? I'm seeing references to something called Meridian Development Group. What exactly did my grandfather leave me? There was a pause. Can you come to my office this afternoon? This is better discussed in person. His tone made me nervous, but also hopeful. I took another sick day. My boss wasn't happy, but I didn't care. This felt more important than any graphic design project. Sterling's office was on the Upper East Side. Old money lawyers. Mahogany furniture. Law books lining every wall. Sit down, Marcus, he said, gesturing to a leather chair. We need to talk about your grandfather's business interests. He pulled out a thick file. Much thicker than the documents I'd seen. Your grandfather was more successful than you realized. And more secretive about his wealth. What do you mean? Joseph Thompson wasn't just a small business owner. He was a major real estate investor. He owned significant stakes in several development companies. My head was spinning. How significant? Sterling opened the file and showed me a corporate structure chart. Lines connecting boxes. Numbers and percentages everywhere. Through various holding companies and trusts, your grandfather owned 68% of Meridian Development Group. 68%. That made him the majority shareholder. So I inherited everything. You now own controlling interest in Meridian Development Group. The room was spinning. I gripped the arms of my chair. That can't be right. I'm being evicted by Meridian. They're buying my building. Sterling smiled. Actually, you're buying your own building. Through your company. My company. As majority shareholder, you control Meridian's board of directors. You make all major decisions, including which properties to buy and what to do with them. I sat in stunned silence. This was impossible. Why didn't anyone tell me this before? Your grandfather's instructions were very specific. He wanted you to experience life as a regular person before you understood your inheritance. He thought it would make you a better businessman. Typical Grandpa Joe. Always teaching lessons, even from beyond the grave. So what happens now? Now you decide what kind of owner you want to be. Sterling handed me another folder. This one contained Meridian's financial records, property portfolios, development projects, revenue statements. The company was massive. Hundreds of properties across the city. Billions in assets. Dozens of ongoing projects, including the purchase of 147 Riverside Drive. My building. My home. The board meeting to finalize your building purchase is scheduled for Friday, Sterling said. As majority shareholder, you can attend, or you can send instructions through me. I thought about Vincent Torino, his smug smile when he announced the sale, his years of harassment, his attempts to force us out. I want to attend in person. Sterling raised an eyebrow. Are you sure? These meetings can be intimidating. I'm sure. I had 3 days to prepare. 3 days to plan my entrance into the corporate world I just inherited. 3 days to figure out how to handle Vincent Torino and his development deal. That night, I called Mrs. Rodriguez. Don't give up yet, I told her. I think I found a way to fight this. What kind of way? The kind that involves owning the company that's trying to evict us. The next 3 days were a crash course in corporate real estate. Sterling arranged for me to meet with Meridian's CFO, Janet Walsh. She walked me through the company's operations, the development pipeline, the financial projections. Meridian was incredibly successful. They specialized in buying rent-controlled buildings, evicting tenants, converting to luxury condos, selling at massive profits. It was a business model built on displacing poor people to make rich people richer. Your building on Riverside Drive is a perfect example, Janet explained. We're buying it for $12 million. After renovation, the condos will sell for $30 million total. $18 million in profit from destroying people's homes. What happens to the existing tenants? Standard procedure. 30-day notice. $5,000 relocation assistance. They find somewhere else to live. She said it so casually, like we were talking about furniture, not families. And if they refuse to leave? Legal proceedings. Eviction through the courts. It rarely comes to that. Most tenants take the money and go. Most tenants, but not all. I spent hours reviewing Meridian's other projects. Building after building. Neighborhood after neighborhood. The same pattern everywhere. Buy low. Evict tenants. Renovate. Sell high. Repeat. It was legal. It was profitable. It was destroying communities across the city. But now I owned the company, which meant I could change how it operated. The question was, how? I could cancel the Riverside Drive purchase. Save my building. Keep my neighbors in their homes. But what about all the other buildings? All the other tenants facing eviction? I needed a bigger plan. A way to use my new power responsibly. Thursday night, I met with my fellow tenants one last time. We gathered in the community room. Our final meeting in the building we'd all called home. I have an update on our situation, I announced. Everyone looked hopeful. They trusted me to have found some legal solution. The sale is going through, but there might be some changes to the development plan. What kind of changes? Sarah asked. The kind where we get to stay. Mrs. Rodriguez frowned. How is that possible? Let's just say I've been in contact with someone who has influence over the development company. It wasn't technically a lie. I did have influence. Total influence, actually. So we don't have to move. Mr. Kim asked. If everything goes according to plan, no one has to move. The relief in that room was overwhelming. People were crying, hugging, celebrating. But I knew the real test was still coming. The board meeting. The confrontation with Vincent Torino. Friday morning, I put on my only suit. It was 3 years old and didn't fit perfectly, but it would have to do. I was about to walk into a room full of millionaire developers and real estate executives. People who'd been doing this for decades. And I was about to tell them that their newest, most profitable project was canceled. Sterling met me outside Meridian's headquarters. A gleaming tower in Midtown Manhattan. Are you ready for this? He asked. No, but I'm doing it anyway. Your grandfather would be proud. I hope so. Because what I was about to do would either save my community or destroy the company he'd built. The Meridian Development Group boardroom was exactly what you'd expect. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Central Park. Mahogany conference table. Leather chairs. Power and money everywhere. 5 executives were already seated. Janet Walsh, the CFO I'd met earlier. 2 vice presidents I didn't recognize. A senior project manager. And the company president, David Chun. At the head of the table sat Vincent Torino. He looked different in this setting. Cleaner, more professional, but still sleazy underneath. He was laughing with David Chun about something, probably counting his profits from our misery. I entered quietly and took a seat at the far end of the table. Everyone looked at me curiously. Excuse me, David Chun said. I think you're in the wrong meeting. Actually, I'm exactly where I need to be. Sterling entered behind me and took the seat next to mine. Gentlemen, I'd like to introduce Marcus Thompson, Joseph Thompson's grandson and heir. The room got very quiet. Joseph Thompson's name carried weight here. Marcus recently inherited his grandfather's holdings in Meridian Development Group, Sterling continued. Vincent Torino was staring at me. Recognition was slowly dawning. Wait, he said. You look familiar. Do I know you? Apartment 4B, 147 Riverside Drive. His face went white. You're one of my tenants. Former tenant. Thanks to you. The other executives were looking confused. David Chun was shuffling papers nervously. I'm sorry, Chun said. What exactly is going on here? Sterling stood up. What's going on is that Mr. Thompson owns 68% of this company. He's your new majority shareholder. You could hear a pin drop. Vincent Torino's face was cycling through emotions. Confusion, realization, panic. That's impossible, he stammered. He's just some kid. A graphic designer. He lives in rent control. Lived, I corrected. You evicted me, remember? I stood up and walked to the head of the table. Vincent scrambled out of his chair. My first act as majority shareholder, I announced, is to cancel the Riverside Drive acquisition. You can't do that, Chin protested. We have contracts. Legal obligations. Check the fine print, Sterling said. All major acquisitions require approval from the majority shareholder. That approval is hereby withdrawn. Vincent was turning red. Do you have any idea how much money you're throwing away? $18 million in profit, according to your projections. Exactly. This is the stupidest business decision I've ever seen. Maybe, but it's my decision to make. I turned to address the whole room. From now on, Meridian Development Group will operate differently. We'll still buy buildings. We'll still develop properties. But we won't displace existing tenants. That's impossible, Janet Walsh said. The profit margins don't work with sitting tenants. Then we'll find a new business model. Vincent was practically frothing. This is insane. You're going to destroy everything your grandfather built. My grandfather built wealth by taking advantage of people who couldn't fight back. I'm going to build something better. I walked back to Vincent. He was still standing, still furious. But I do have a proposal for you, Vincent. He glared at me suspiciously. What kind of proposal? Meridian will buy your building. Not for $12 million. For $6 million. $6 million? That's half what we agreed on. Take it or leave it. And Vincent. I leaned closer so only he could hear. If you refuse, I'll make sure every tenant in every building you own knows exactly what kind of landlord you really are. The harassment, the illegal tactics, the building code violations I'm sure you've been hiding. His face went pale again. You're blackmailing me. I'm offering you a fair price for a building you've been running into the ground. $6 million is more than you deserve. Vincent looked around the room, at the executives staring at him, at Sterling taking notes, at me, his former tenant, now his buyer. Fine, he said through gritted teeth. $6 million. Excellent. Sterling will handle the paperwork. Vincent grabbed his coat and headed for the door. But he stopped and turned back. This isn't over, kid. You have no idea what you're doing. Maybe not, but I'm the one with the checkbook now. He left, slamming the door behind him. The silence after Vincent left was deafening. David Chun was the first to speak. Well, that was unexpected. I imagine it was. So what happens now? Janet Walsh asked. Now we figure out how to run this company ethically. Over the next hour, I outlined my vision for Meridian's future. We'd still develop properties, but we'd work with existing communities instead of against them. Rent-controlled tenants could stay at current rates. We'd improve buildings without displacing residents. We'd focus on vacant lots and abandoned properties. The profit margins will be smaller, I admitted, but the profits will be sustainable and legal and something we can be proud of. Some executives looked skeptical. Others seemed intrigued by the challenge. I'll need your help to make this work, I told them. Anyone who's not comfortable with the new direction is free to leave. Nobody left, at least not that day. After the meeting, I walked back to Riverside Drive, my former building, my current property. Mrs. Rodriguez was waiting in the lobby. So were Mr. Kim, Sarah, and the other remaining tenants. Well, Mrs. Rodriguez asked nervously. The sale went through. You now have a new landlord. Their faces fell. This wasn't what they wanted to hear. But I continued, your new landlord has decided that rent-controlled tenants can stay at their current rates indefinitely. It took a moment for this to sink in. Wait, Sarah said slowly. Are you saying we don't have to move? I'm saying you're home. For as long as you want to be. The celebration was immediate and overwhelming. Hugging, crying, laughing, relief and joy mixing together. How did you make this happen? Mrs. Rodriguez asked. Let's just say I had some influence with the new ownership. That evening, I signed the papers making me the official owner of 147 Riverside Drive. My home, my responsibility. 6 months later, Meridian Development Group had transformed into something completely different. We were still profitable, but our profits came from building affordable housing instead of destroying it. We'd saved 12 buildings from demolition, kept over 200 families in their homes, and proven that ethical development was possible. Vincent Torino sold his remaining properties and moved to Florida. Last I heard, he was selling timeshares and complaining about millennials ruining the real estate business. As for me, I moved back into apartment 4B, the same tiny studio where this all started. But now, I also have an office on the 20th floor of Meridian Tower. 2 lives, 2 perspectives, Two ways of understanding the city I love. People ask me if I miss being just another struggling tenant. If I regret taking on so much responsibility. The answer is complicated. There was something pure about that old life. Simple. Uncomplicated by corporate decisions and financial pressures. But then I think about Mrs. Rodriguez, still making her café con leche in 2A. Mr. Kim, still raising his kids in 3C. Sarah, still chasing her acting dreams in 4A. They're all still home. Still safe. Still part of the community Vincent tried to destroy. And I realize that sometimes the best revenge isn't just beating your enemies. It's proving them wrong about what's possible. Vincent saw tenants as obstacles to profit. I see them as the reason profit matters. He saw buildings as commodities to flip. I see them as communities to protect. He thought I was just another powerless tenant he could push around. I didn't just save my home. I became the landlord. But more importantly, I became the kind of landlord I always wished I had. The kind who remembers what it's like to count every dollar. To worry about rent increases. To fight for the right to stay home. My grandfather taught me that wealth without purpose is just hoarding. Power without compassion is just bullying. Vincent Torino learned that lesson the hard way. When the tenant you're trying to evict turns out to own the company doing the evicting, sometimes the best business decision isn't the most profitable one. Sometimes it's just the right one. And sometimes, just sometimes, the little guy wins.